Hello, my name is Beatrice. I'm 60 years old and I want to share a story that changed my life forever. After suffering 20 years of relentless humiliation, I finally escaped my cruel ex-husband. For 5 long years, I poured my heart into rescuing abandoned dogs, rebuilding my shattered life, and finding peace in small, quiet moments. I thought I had left all the fear and pain behind, that I had finally reclaimed control over my own happiness. But one rainy afternoon, while walking through the streets I thought were safe, I saw him. The truth I discovered in that instant hit me like a thunderbolt, and a chilling realization struck me. The worst was still waiting just around the corner. I froze, heart pounding, as memories I had tried to bury surged back. How had he found his way back into my world? And what was he planning now after all these years of absence? Every instinct in me screamed that danger was near, not just for me, but for the people I had grown to love, and for the life I had built so carefully. There were secrets, lies, and traps hidden beneath the surface, and I knew that surviving this would take everything I had. But what happened next? The twists, the betrayals, and the unexpected allies changed everything. If you want to uncover the shocking truth behind that moment, the full story is unlike anything you've ever heard. But before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. I love reading your comments and knowing where you are. Now let's understand how this story really began. It was a misty morning, the kind that makes every tree branch glisten like it's carrying tiny secrets. I pulled Max close as we walked through the park, his scruffy fur damp with rain, one floppy ear bouncing with every step. His little paws sloshed softly in the puddles, and I adjusted the red bandana around his neck, my fingers lingering a moment longer than necessary. He looked up at me, head tilted, eyes deep pools of loyalty and understanding. Max had been with me through the loneliest stretches of my life. The years when Arthur's presence had felt like a shadow clinging to every corner of my world. And now, here we were, 5 years after escaping the nightmare, walking in quiet peace, or so I thought. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and damp leaves, a scent that usually calmed me. But then I saw him. Across the park, standing near the fountain, where the water shimmered under the gray light. Arthur. His tailored coat, the glint of his expensive watch, the cocky tilt of his head, it was all the same arrogance, the same cruelty. My stomach twisted into knots I hadn't felt in years. I had thought I was free, that those days were behind me, but the moment my eyes met his, the old fears surged. The betrayal, the humiliation, the long years of subtle torment, I felt them all at once. Like a storm I'd barely survived now breaking over me again. Max growled, low and warning, pressing himself against my leg. I gripped his leash tighter, heart hammering, trying to breathe. Max, I whispered, though the sound of my own voice felt foreign. The old habit of talking to myself when Arthur was near, that instinct that had kept me safe kicked in. But then I noticed Eleanor, my younger sister, standing next to him, smiling like he was some kind of hero, like he'd always been untouchable. The betrayal stung sharper than any rain could. My chest tightened, and for a heartbeat I couldn't move, couldn't even think. How had he ensnared her so quickly? My heart sank as I realized the worst wasn't over, not by a long shot. I watched as she laughed at something he said, her hand brushing against his arm. A fleeting touch, but enough to make my skin crawl. Max's hackles rose, and I felt a pang of guilt for dragging him into my past, into my pain, but also a fierce relief that he was alert, that he was mine. His presence grounded me. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to step forward, to keep walking, to act as if the sight of him didn't threaten to unravel me completely. But inside, every memory came rushing back, the late nights when I lay awake. Terrified, the whispered threats, the way he had managed to make me question my own worth. I had fought so hard to reclaim my life, to rebuild from the fragments he had left behind. And now, seeing him here, with Eleanor, I realized the battle was far from over. I tried to remind myself of the strength I'd gathered over these years. The shelters I'd started for abandoned dogs, the small victories of connecting with people who truly cared, the quiet moments with Max where nothing else existed but our companionship. Yet, as Arthur's smirk caught the corner of my eye, I felt the familiar surge of anger and fear intertwine. My mind raced through possibilities: how to protect Eleanor, how to confront him, how to navigate the dangerous web he had spun so effortlessly. And as Max nudged my hand, his eyes urging me forward, I felt a surge of determination. I would not let him harm her. I could not. Not now, not ever. As we continued down the rain-slicked path, I noticed small details I had never seen before. The way the water pooled along the edges of the fountain, the distant call of a crow, the smell of damp pavement mingling with wet grass. Each detail sharpened my senses, heightened my awareness. Max stayed close, moving with an almost instinctual caution, and I followed his lead, allowing myself a sliver of hope in the midst of dread. Even in this storm, even facing the shadow of my past, I realized that survival wasn't just about fleeing. It was about observing, planning, and protecting those you loved. Max's warm presence was my anchor, and the bond we shared was unspoken yet stronger than any fear. I glanced back one last time, and Arthur's gaze caught mine. There was recognition there, a flicker of something I could not read. Was it surprise, anger, or the faintest hint of fear? I didn't know, and I didn't care. What mattered was the resolve coiling in my chest, a quiet, unyielding promise. I would face whatever came next. Max and I would face it together. And somehow, amidst the drizzle and the ache of old wounds, I found a small, stubborn thread of courage weaving itself through my fear. Whatever Arthur had planned, whatever he intended, he had underestimated me, and he would learn soon enough that I was no longer the woman who cowered at his shadow. The park faded behind us as we walked, the mist wrapping around us like a protective shroud. I felt Max's warmth against my leg, the soft pressure of his head when I stooped to scratch behind his ear, and I whispered, "We can't let him hurt her, Max. Not Eleanor, not us." His tail thumped softly, a quiet agreement, a small heartbeat of hope. The journey ahead was uncertain, frightening, and fraught with memories I had long tried to bury. Yet in that moment I understood something fundamental. Fear could not paralyze me, and anger could not consume me. Only purpose and loyalty could guide the way. And with Max by my side, I was ready to step into whatever storm awaited. I returned home that afternoon with Max padding quietly beside me, his paws leaving small wet prints across the wooden floor. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, and the dim light filtered through the curtained windows, casting soft shadows across the familiar, modest interior I had worked so hard to make a sanctuary. The smell of damp coats and wet dog fur mingled with the faint scent of old books, a comforting combination that reminded me I was home, truly home, even if my heart still thudded with the echo of Arthur's face in the park. I placed my keys on the worn wooden table and took a moment to breathe, inhaling the smell of aged wood and the quiet that filled the room. Max's ears twitched at the distant sounds outside, the faint hum of traffic, the occasional drip of water from the eaves, and I felt a flicker of warmth at having him there. He nudged my hand with his wet nose as if sensing my unease, and I knelt to scratch behind his floppy ear, murmuring, "We can't let him hurt her, Max. Not Eleanor." The words barely left my lips before the weight of their truth pressed down on me, making my chest ache. This was no longer just about fear or old wounds. It was about protecting someone I loved, someone who didn't yet fully see the danger she was in. I fumbled for my phone and dialed Eleanor's number, my fingers trembling slightly. The line rang, but there was only the cold, impersonal click of a blocked call. My throat tightened, a mixture of panic and frustration rising up like bile. He'd already begun his work, his manipulation, isolating her from anyone who could help. My sister, so kind, so trusting, had no idea the web that was being woven around her. I felt Max press close to me, his warm body a steady reassurance as I sank into the nearest chair, gripping the phone like a lifeline. I needed clarity, evidence, something concrete to understand just how deep Arthur's machinations ran. I poured myself a cup of tea, the steam curling around my face, filling my senses with its gentle warmth. Max settled at my feet, his eyes fixed on me, full of silent understanding. I whispered again, my voice almost a trembling confession, "We can't let him hurt her. Not Eleanor, not anyone else." The words were a promise, a vow made in the quiet comfort of my home. And yet the fear lingered, coiling around my heart like a snake ready to strike. The attic had always been a place of quiet discovery, dusty and dim, filled with relics of a lifelong past. I climbed the narrow steps, Max trailing behind me, his nails clicking softly on the old wood. The air was cooler up there, musty with the scent of paper and mothballs, and I felt the familiar tingle of unease mixed with anticipation. I ran my hands along the boxes and old trunks, feeling for anything that might reveal the truth about him. There, tucked behind a stack of yellowed newspapers, I found Arthur's old journals. Their spines cracked with age, pages yellowed and curling at the edges. I opened the first journal, the handwriting immediately recognizable, flowing with a practiced ease that now made my stomach turn. As I read, a pattern emerged, one that sent a shiver down my spine. He preyed on women, always after a loss, always exploiting grief and vulnerability to ensnare them in his schemes. Page after page detailed manipulations, false confidences, and careful, calculated cruelty. I felt sick, but I could not stop reading. Each entry was a window into the dark machinery of his mind. And yet, amid the horror, a spark of clarity ignited within me. Now I knew what I was facing. Knowledge, even this dreadful kind, was power. I carefully stacked the journals and set them aside, my hands shaking. Max nudged me again as if to remind me he was here, that I was not alone. I whispered to him softly, more to steady myself than for him to hear, "We can't let him hurt her, Max. We'll be ready." The connection we shared, unspoken yet profound, gave me the courage to plan, to breathe, to begin the careful threading of my response. Then, without warning, a shattering crash split the quiet. Glass exploded across the floor and Max leaped, barking furiously. My heart froze. I turned and my eyes fell upon the broken window, the jagged edges cutting through the soft light. Wrapped around a stone, wet from the rain, was a note. I snatched it up with trembling hands, reading the words scrawled in jagged, cruel letters. "Stay dead to us, Beatrice." A chill ran through me, the kind that sinks deep into your bones, and for a moment I could not breathe. The message was simple, terrifying, but the intent behind it was unmistakable. He had already begun to reach into my life again, trying to corral fear and isolation like he had once done for 20 long years. And yet, even as the adrenaline surged, a strange clarity settled over me. This was no longer a woman without power, no longer someone to be cowered into silence. The years had shaped me, forged me in ways he could not undo. I looked down at Max, his eyes steady and unwavering, and felt a flicker of determination burn through my fear. This would not be the end. We had survived once and we would survive again. I would protect Eleanor, confront the darkness of Arthur's schemes, and face the storm he had sent into my life. With Max at my side, I could meet the fear with courage, the threat with action, and the grief with an unshakable resolve. The rain outside continued to fall, a soft percussion against the roof, echoing the rhythm of my heartbeat. I gathered the broken glass, careful not to cut myself, and placed the notes safely on the table. Each careful movement grounded me, a ritual of defiance and preparation. I whispered again, almost a chant, "We won't let him win, Max. Not this time. Not ever." His tail thumped against the floor in quiet agreement, and for the first time since seeing him in the park, I felt a swell of hope. We had a path forward, jagged and uncertain as it was, but it was ours to walk. I sat for a long while, sipping the cooling tea, eyes fixed on the journals, on the note, on the small, steadfast presence of Max at my feet. And in that quiet, I realized that survival was not just a matter of avoiding danger, but of reclaiming agency, of nurturing courage in the face of intimidation, of embracing the ties that truly mattered. Fear had arrived at my doorstep again, uninvited and cruel. The soul had resolved, loyalty, and a fierce, enduring love. And that, I knew, was a force no cruel hand could break. The parking lot smelled of wet asphalt and the faint tang of exhaust, a mixture that usually made me uneasy. But today, it felt like the perfect backdrop for my careful observation. Max stayed close to my side, ears twitching, muscles taut, the quiet alertness I had come to trust over the years emanating from him in waves. I leaned slightly on my cane, a feigned weakness, a carefully constructed illusion. My heart thumped in a rhythm that matched the steady drizzle, and I told myself over and over that I could do this. I could watch, I could gather evidence, and I could protect Eleanor without letting him know I was aware of his reach. Arthur stood by the silver SUV near the edge of the lot, the way he always did when he wanted to be seen, always aware, always measuring. My chest tightened as my eyes took in his every movement, the tilt of his head, the easy confidence in his stance, the faint curl of a smirk that had haunted my dreams for years. I could see Eleanor's car pulling in behind him, the rain glinting off the windshield. But what really caught my attention was the figure in the back seat of the SUV. A woman, smiling, blowing a small, teasing kiss toward the windshield. It was not Eleanor. The realization made my stomach knot. His manipulations were already deeper than I had feared, layers hidden beneath the surface of civility. I shifted slightly, pretending to struggle to adjust my scarf, allowing myself to breathe in slow, careful gulps of air. Max pressed against my leg, a silent signal of the tension I could not yet act upon. He sensed it, the threat, the trap, the calculated danger that surrounded this man like a second skin. I followed his gaze, felt the vibration of his quiet warning, and I knew that even a casual step too close to him could give away my intent. As Eleanor approached, I forced myself to step forward, shuffling slowly, as if I were just another frail shopper. My voice, when I muttered a greeting to no one in particular, was soft, almost tremulous, yet every word was calculated. "Oh, hello, Max." "Careful there," I said, smiling weakly at him, not Max, and then glancing toward Arthur, measuring his reactions. He noticed me immediately, of course. He always did. His smirk widened, a predator recognizing the movement of prey. "Still wearing rags, Beatrice?" His voice, smooth and sharp, cut across the lot like a blade. "Leave Eleanor alone." There was no warmth, no subtlety in his warning, only the clear, deliberate cruelty of a man who thrived on intimidation. My fingers tightened briefly on my cane, feigning a tremor that would make him think he had unsettled me. Max's ears flicked back, his body stiffening, the fur along his spine raising imperceptibly, his subtle warning to me to remain cautious. I breathed through the surge of adrenaline, forcing my mind to focus. Eleanor had been coerced into signing over her power of attorney. Arthur's letters and legal maneuvers lying in wait like hidden blades. The story he had woven her declining mental health was pure fiction, crafted to isolate her, to make her doubt herself while giving him the illusion of legal authority. The injustice of it made my stomach churn, a mixture of rage and sorrow that clawed at my chest. Yet beneath it all, I found a thread of determination. I would not allow him to rewrite the narrative of Eleanor's life. Not quietly. Not ever. I let my gaze wander, pretending to adjust my coat, to focus on the small puddle forming near the parking line, and then back up, careful not to let him see the full scope of my awareness. The woman in the back seat caught my eye again. Her gesture, blowing a kiss, was deliberate and mocking. My mind raced with possibilities. Was she complicit? Was she another pawn in Arthur's game? The thought made my jaw tighten, but it also strengthened my resolve. Each subtle detail, every micro-expression, was a piece of the puzzle I had to solve before taking action. I shuffled closer to the SUV, Max at my heels, still alert, his instincts a guiding force I relied on more than any strategy. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror of the car parked next to me, seeing the woman's reflection shift, her smile never fading. I knew then that deception was layered, and that patience would be my greatest weapon. Max pressed closer to me, reminding me silently that we were a team, that every step forward would be deliberate, measured, and careful. Arthur's attention shifted momentarily, and I seized the chance to move closer, leaning slightly as if my knees had weakened, my voice pitched low, almost whispering to myself, "Max, stay calm. We can handle this." The words felt like a tether to sanity, a thread connecting fear to action. The moment stretched, suspended between the ordinary rhythm of a parking lot and the extraordinary danger simmering beneath it. My heart pounded in my chest, but beneath it, a quiet determination took root. I glimpsed Eleanor through the windshield briefly, her face composed, polite, yet her eyes held an uncertainty I recognized. My sister didn't know the full scope of Arthur's machinations, didn't see the trap tightening around her. But I could. And I would. I would make sure she understood that fear was not the only response available. Courage existed, even in the smallest gestures, even in the act of simply observing, learning, and planning. A drop of rain slid down my cheek, unnoticed amidst the torrent of thoughts as I held my ground, feigning weakness while watching, calculating, and waiting for the exact moment when intervention would be necessary. Max shifted slightly at my feet, a quiet reminder that he was ready, that I was never truly alone. Every fiber of my being focused on the task at hand, every heartbeat a rhythm of resolve. The world seemed to contract to the space of the parking lot, to the delicate balance between exposure and concealment, between fear and the careful, deliberate action that might save my sister. I swallowed hard, forcing my body to appear fragile, my mind to remain sharp, my spirit to remain unbroken. The woman in the back seat shifted again, and for a split second, I caught the glimmer of a familiar brooch heirloom jewelry, a detail from the past, a thread that tied the deception to history. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but my heart recognized it. Each detail strengthened my resolve. Each observation was a step toward protection, toward justice, toward reclaiming the narrative that Arthur had tried so meticulously to control. As I straightened slightly, pretending to steady myself, I whispered to Max once more, voice barely audible, "Watch, Max. We'll fix this, together." His steady gaze met mine, and I felt the smallest flicker of hope ignite. Even in the shadow of Arthur's manipulation, even in the presence of coercion and deceit, there was a path forward. We would navigate it carefully, one step at a time, and Eleanor's life, her autonomy, and her peace would not be taken from her again. The motel sat on the edge of town like a reluctant sentinel, a row of weathered rooms with peeling paint and the faint scent of mildew seeping through the cracked doors. Max and I arrived just as dusk was painting the sky in muted shades of purple and gray, the rain from earlier leaving a sheen across the asphalt. I parked a safe distance away, leaving the engine running for warmth. and Max jumped down from the seat with a quiet agility, his paws moving silently against the wet pavement. He sniffed the air, ears twitching, eyes scanning the surrounding shadows with a precision that never failed to awe me. I whispered softly to him, "Stay close, watch, and wait. We'll need every instinct we have." I crouched behind a low shrub near the edge of the lot, the branches dripping with residual rain, and peered toward the room she had entered. The woman from the Chevet Chloé, as I would later piece together, stood there, her posture casual but calculated, her movements fluid with confidence that felt unnatural, forced even. She laughed softly into the phone she held to her ear, the sound floating on the damp evening air, and I felt my chest tighten. How had Arthur woven her into his world so seamlessly? How many layers of deception were stacked between them, hidden from the light of day? Max's quiet presence at my side, tense and alert, grounded me. His steady breathing and the subtle press of his body against mine reminded me that I was not alone in this. Together, we had weathered storms before, and this would be no different. I watched her carefully, noting the ring on her finger and, most importantly, the glinting diamond brooch pinned near her collar. The detail seemed almost absurd in its subtlety, the way the light caught the facets as she shifted slightly. Something about it tugged at my memory, a whisper of familiarity buried deep, connected to long-forgotten family heirlooms. Fragments of a past I had tried to keep separate from the chaos Arthur had caused. My breath caught. That brooch heirloom jewelry that belonged to our mother was now on this woman, tied to the man who had haunted so many corners of my life. I stayed low, letting my mind trace the possibilities, forcing myself to observe without acting prematurely. Max's tail brushed against my arm as if sensing the tension vibrating from me. I whispered again, barely audible. "Something's not right here, Max. Watch her. We'll figure it out." Each subtle movement, each gesture Chloe made, seemed laden with hidden meaning. Her voice carried a warmth and ease that didn't belong to her, not entirely. And yet, there was something strained, almost deliberate in the cadence, a practiced perfection that unsettled me more than any overt threat could. I followed her movements as she re-entered the motel room, catching sight of Arthur's reflection in the glass window as he passed behind her. The sudden clarity struck me like a lightning bolt. He had another life, another wife. The truth hit with a jolt that made my knees wobble, the air thick and heavy in my lungs. Arthur was a bigamist. He had manipulated not one, but two women, weaving separate narratives, separate illusions, all to serve his ego and control. The revelation left me reeling, the weight of betrayal compounded in ways I hadn't yet considered. Max nudged my hand, his eyes imploring me to stay grounded, to focus. I watched the woman carefully, noticing the subtle manner in which she adjusted the brooch, her fingers brushing the diamond as if drawing strength or reassurance from its presence. The same brooch that had once belonged to our mother, now a silent witness to deception and manipulation. My chest tightened as I realized how deeply Arthur had orchestrated this, entwining the past with the present, making personal history a tool of control. I felt a pang of sorrow for the innocent caught in his schemes, for the ties that had been violated, and for Eleanor, who remained unaware of the full scope of danger that loomed over her. Every detail became magnified, the faint smell of perfume, the click of high heels on the wet pavement, the small, careful gestures that spoke volumes about her place in Arthur's life. My heart ached for the sister I had once shared secrets with, for the trust and innocence that Arthur had twisted into something fragile and dangerous. And yet, within the ache, a flicker of determination rose. I could not allow the past to dictate the future. Knowledge was my weapon, and the insight gleaned from this stakeout was a step toward reclaiming power for Elena, for myself, and for the truth. The sky darkened further, rain returning in a whispering drizzle, and I felt Max's quiet reassurance against my leg. His presence reminded me that courage is often quiet, grounded in loyalty, and manifest in subtle actions rather than dramatic gestures. I shifted slightly, making sure my movements were deliberate but understated. Every inch measured to avoid detection, every thought sharpened to cut through the fog of deception. Chloe's laughter floated faintly from the room, and I pressed myself lower, feeling the cold bite of asphalt against my knees. Her ease was a mask, but every detail I observed chipped away at it, revealing cracks beneath the surface. And then the brooch caught my eye again, glinting in the dim light. A realization struck me with sudden clarity. This was no ordinary piece of jewelry. The diamond, the design, the care with which it was worn. This brooch was our mother's heirloom. My fingers itched to reach out, to snatch it back from the hands of manipulation, but I remained still. Max's gaze met mine, steady, unwavering. Together, we understood that this small, shining object was a symbol, a beacon that illuminated the depths of Arthur's deceit and the family history he had corrupted for his own gain. The weight of the discovery pressed on me, but it was tempered by a quiet surge of resolve. I had witnessed enough, seen enough, to begin piecing together the puzzle of Arthur's machinations. The stakes had risen, the danger was tangible, but so was the path forward. With Max at my side, I was no longer simply a woman haunted by the past. I was an observer, a planner, and a protector. The rain pattered against the roof of the car where we waited, a rhythmic reminder that time moved steadily forward, even when shadows threatened to overtake the present. I whispered softly to Max, voice barely above the sound of rain, "We see it now. We know, and we'll make it right." His tail brushed against my hand in quiet affirmation, a bond unbroken, a silent promise that no manipulation, no deceit, no cruelty could sever. The brooch, the woman, the revelation of bigamy, it all became part of a larger truth that demanded action. And I knew in the marrow of my bones that the next steps I took would shape not only Eleanor's fate, but the reclamation of a life that Arthur had tried so hard to control. The night stretched around us, heavy and expectant, and I felt a flicker of hope ignite, fragile but unwavering. This was the turning point. This was where the truth began to reclaim its power. The diner smelled of fried eggs, burnt coffee, and the faint tang of cleaning solution, an odd combination that somehow grounded me in reality. I slid into a corner booth, Max curled quietly at my feet, his body a comforting warmth that reminded me I was not alone. Outside, the drizzle still clung to the edges of the parking lot, tapping against the windows like a quiet drumbeat, punctuating the tension I carried within me. My hands trembled slightly as I folded them in front of me, pretending calm, as I watched the door for the familiar figure of Chloe. When she arrived, it was with a casual grace that immediately made my stomach knot. She smiled, light and confident, but her eyes carried a sharpness, a subtle edge that betrayed intent. I tried to measure her, to gauge whether the casual demeanor was genuine or carefully rehearsed. And my chest tightened as realization struck. She was complicit. She was part of Arthur's network, his accomplice, the one who carried out the subtle manipulations that made his schemes so effective. Chloe slid into the booth across from me, a small laugh escaping her lips, the sound light but laced with condescension. "Beatrice," she said, tilting her head in mock sweetness, "you always were so. Ernest, it's admirable, really, how you try to make sense of things that don't concern you." Her words, though soft, cut deep. I felt small, diminished in her presence, the weight of years and failures pressing against me. Max shifted under the table, a low rumble in his throat, his eyes meeting mine with silent warning. His quiet strength reminded me that I was not powerless, that courage was not about size or status, it was about resolve. About standing firm even when the world tried to make you feel insignificant. I forced myself to breathe slowly, deliberately, letting the rhythm steady my racing heart. My fingers pressed into the edge of the table, grounding me, and I whispered under my breath, more to Max than to anyone else, "We won't let him win. We can handle this." His ears twitched, his eyes softening, a silent acknowledgement of the promise I had made. It was a small moment, but it was enough to bolster the resolve coiling in my chest. Chloe's gaze lingered on me, calculating, almost predatory. "You know," she continued, voice dripping with false innocence, "Arthur trusts me. He trusts me to do things you couldn't possibly imagine, things that keep his life orderly. It must be frustrating to realize your sister has placed herself in such capable hands while you try so hard." The words were carefully chosen, designed to provoke, to unsettle, and for a moment, I felt the sting of inadequacy, a flash of the helplessness I had battled for so long. But Max nudged my leg, a subtle reminder that fear alone did not define me. I had a role to play, a strategy to execute, and a life to protect that Chloe would never understand. I leaned slightly forward, eyes locked on hers, voice measured but firm. "You may think you're helping him," I said, the tremor in my voice carefully masked by determination, "but one day, the truth will catch up. And when it does, you'll see that loyalty built on deception is nothing more than a fragile illusion." Chloe's laugh rippled across the table, light and dismissive, but beneath it, I sensed the faintest hesitation. Perhaps a crack in her confidence. Perhaps an opening. The diner hummed with life around us, the clatter of dishes and low conversations forming a background that contrasted sharply with the intensity at our table. Max rested his head against my leg, his presence a steady reminder that we were in this together. The warmth of him, the softness of his fur, the quiet confidence in his steady gaze, all of it bolstered the courage I drew from the smallest, most intimate bonds in my life. I would not be cowed. I would not be silenced. And most importantly, I would protect Eleanor at all costs. As I studied Chloe, noting the subtle tension in her fingers and the way her smile faltered for the briefest moment, my phone vibrated sharply in my pocket. I pulled it out, heart lurching, and the screen lit up with a message that made my blood run cold. "Help me. I'm locked in the study." My stomach dropped, a lead weight settling over every thought, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to suspend itself. Eleanor, my sister, she was in danger, right now under Arthur's control, trapped in a room I could not yet see. Max growled softly, low and urgent, pressing his body closer to mine. His eyes were sharp, alert, a mirror to the panic and determination coiling in my own chest. I swallowed hard, forcing a breath, letting the fear channel into focus. There was no time to hesitate. Every second counted, every decision mattered, and the weight of inaction was far too heavy to bear. My hand brushed the edge of the table, gripping it as if drawing strength from the solid surface. From the ordinary objects around me that reminded me I could act, I could protect, I could fight. I looked at Chloe one last time, reading the faint flicker of doubt in her eyes, the hesitation beneath the practiced confidence. Then I rose, careful not to draw attention, Max following silently, muscles coiled and ready. I whispered to him, voice low and urgent, "This is it, Max. Eleanor needs us. Let's move." The sound of my own voice steadied me, the rhythm of words grounding me even as adrenaline surged through every vein. Outside, the rain had begun to pick up again, a light mist that clung to my hair and coat, and the world felt both immediate and surreal, heightened by the urgency of the moment. Each step toward my car, each careful glance to ensure Chloe did not anticipate our next move, was a negotiation with fear itself. But beneath the trepidation, a quiet, powerful resolve surged. I had survived before, and I would survive again. I would protect my sister, and we would reclaim the peace Arthur sought to steal from us. Sliding into the car, I felt Max settle beside me, a silent guardian ready for what was to come. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, heart pounding. Yet amidst the storm of fear and uncertainty, a fragile thread of hope persisted. Eleanor needed me, and together we would rise above the manipulation, the deception, the control, the diner, the laughter, Chloe's complicity. All of it receded as the path forward crystallized. I would face this storm. I would not falter. I would not fail. And in the quiet urgency of that moment, I whispered again to Max, "Hold steady, my friend. We're going to save her. Together." His tail brushed against my leg, a soft, reassuring rhythm, and I knew in that simple, unwavering connection that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. The storm had arrived in full force, shaking the eaves of Eleanor's estate with angry gusts and lashing rain that blurred the world outside. The sky roared in a way that seemed to echo the tumult in my chest, a relentless reminder that time had become both enemy and ally. I crouched near the edge of the property, Max pressed close to my side, his body taut, every muscle coiled with awareness. The coal chute loomed before me, rusted and slightly ajar, a dark slit in the foundation of the house that promised entrance and secrecy. My fingers traced the cold metal, slick from rain, and I swallowed, feeling the adrenaline spike. This was it. Every preparation, every observation, every ounce of patience had led to this moment. Max nudged my hand with his nose, a soft but insistent reminder. We were in this together, and the bond we shared was the only armor I needed against the fear gnawing at me. I slid myself into the chute, the metal cold against my palms, the space tight but navigable. The darkness pressed close, a tangible weight, and I forced my breathing to slow. Each inhalation deliberate, each exhale quiet. Max remained outside, his low growl vibrating through the metal beneath my hands, an anchor to reality and a warning to stay vigilant. The scent of coal and damp earth mixed with the faint trace of Eleanor's garden flowers, carried from vents and cracks, grounding me in the life I was fighting to protect. I imagined Eleanor inside, trapped, frightened, her hands brushing against polished wood as she paced, unaware that I was drawing closer with each careful movement. Reaching the floor, I crouched in the shadows, eyes straining to adjust to the dim light spilling from the library windows. Arthur's figure moved within, his posture exaggerated, hands gesturing as he rehearsed some performance. The scene made my stomach churn, not fear for myself, but the dread of what he planned for Eleanor. His voice, smooth and rehearsed, carried faintly through the partially open door. "I'll look devastated, truly. I'll cry, clutch her hand, and when the stairs betray her, she stumble. It'll look like a tragic accident. Perfectly believable." The words hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened, every instinct screaming to act, yet I remained crouched, absorbing every nuance, every detail. I pressed myself against the cold floor, shivering not from the chill alone, but from the sheer gravity of the revelation. Arthur's cruelty had evolved beyond manipulation and isolation. It had grown into something physical, something lethal, cloaked in pretense. Max's eyes appeared at the opening of the chute, reflecting the dim light, steady and unwavering, his subtle growl vibrating reassurance through the metal. I whispered softly, "I hear you, Max. I know exactly what's happening, and we're going to stop it." My words were both prayer and promise, a tether holding me to courage, to action, and to the quiet righteousness that had carried me this far. Every step he rehearsed, every gesture of false grief, felt like a dagger aimed not only at Eleanor, but at the fragile sense of safety I had struggled to rebuild for both of us. I felt a wave of anger and sorrow crash through me simultaneously, grief for the sister I loved, anger at the years stolen, and sorrow for the life he had sought to distort. And yet, within that maelstrom, a quiet clarity emerged. I could not control his actions directly, but I could shape the outcome. Knowledge was my weapon, patience my shield, and Max my unwavering ally. I inched closer to the library entrance, crouching low, aware of every creak and groan of the old wooden floors. My hands brushed the damp carpet at the threshold, every nerve alight with anticipation. I could see the faint glimmer of Arthur's watch catching the light, his movements precise, rehearsed, meticulous. The plan he whispered to himself, how to make Eleanor accidentally fall, was grotesque in its calculation. But the intimacy of it, the meticulous cruelty, fueled a fire in my chest I had long buried beneath fear and self-doubt. I would not allow this. A distant rumble of thunder rolled across the estate, the vibration echoing through the walls, masking the subtle sounds of my movements. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to catch every syllable, every nuance. He rehearsed aloud, practicing the words he would speak, the sobs he would fake, the gestures of helplessness that would frame Eleanor as careless or weak. The thought made bile rise in my throat, yet I forced it down, channeling the nausea into resolve. I had trained myself to endure storms of fear before. This one would be no different. I noticed the faint scuff marks near the top of the staircase through the window, a subtle detail, almost imperceptible, yet it confirmed my worst fear. He had tested the scenario before, calculated the exact angle and pressure, designed the fall to look natural, plausible, undeniable. My hands trembled slightly as I traced the outline of the doorframe, feeling every fiber of my being tighten in response to the danger Eleanor faced. And yet, beneath the fear, a quiet surge of determination emerged. Max shifted slightly outside, ears flicking, alert to any movement, his presence a steady, grounding pulse of loyalty and strength. I whispered under my breath, "Hold, Max. Wait for the right moment. We act only when we must." The words, though soft, were steel to my nerves, a promise to myself and to my sister. I could feel the storm outside battering the estate, rain slicing against windows, wind shaking the eaves. But inside, my focus narrowed to a single point: Eleanor's safety, Arthur's deceit, and the path I would carve through the chaos to reclaim control. Every instinct, every lesson from years of vigilance converged in that moment. I could hear him pacing, rehearsing, manipulating, while I crouched in shadows, unseen, calculating the precise moment to intervene. My mind raced through options, each step weighed against the potential outcome, but I knew the truth. Indecision now would cost more than fear ever could. Max's eyes met mine through the small gap in the chute, steady, unwavering, reflecting the trust and bond that had sustained us through every challenge. I drew a slow, deliberate breath, letting the rhythm of the storm outside synchronize with the rhythm of my pulse. And then, the words pierced the space between us again. Arthur's voice, calm, rehearsed, chillingly deliberate. "She won't see it coming. One misstep, a stumble, and it will be over. All accidental." My chest constricted, every nerve screaming action, yet I stayed crouched, listening, absorbing, and planning. Max pressed closer outside, silent reassurance that courage is often quiet, measured, and steady. My heart ached for Eleanor, but beneath the fear and the dread, a fragile, resilient hope took root. We had seen worse, endured more, and survived. Together, we would prevent the tragedy he intended. I exhaled slowly, voice barely above a whisper. "We see you, Max. We know what he's planning, and we'll stop it." The wind rattled the shingles above, rain hissed against the stone path. And yet, within the turmoil, a quiet, unwavering resolve took hold. Eleanor would not be alone. I would not falter. Max and I were ready, and the night, no matter how dark or storm-tossed, would not prevail over the truth we carried into the shadows of the estate. The house was a labyrinth of shadow and creaking wood, every corner and crawl space a reminder of the history that lingered within its walls. of the lives twisted and controlled under Arthur's meticulous oversight. Max moved beside me with the quiet grace that always left me in awe. Paws soundless against the floorboards, nose twitching as he assessed every scent and vibration. I felt the cold of the vents on my fingertips, traced along the edges where the paint had long since chipped, a subtle decay that mirrored the hidden rot of deceit in this home. The storm outside hammered the roof with relentless energy, but inside, the oppressive silence demanded its own kind of vigilance. I had placed the baby monitors strategically, each device a silent observer. Ears and eyes for the moments I could not physically be present. Their blinking lights were faint, almost imperceptible, but they represented a network of protection, a bridge between Eleanor's vulnerable confinement and my resolve to rescue her. I whispered softly to Max, "This is how we fight, my friend. Quiet, careful, precise. Every piece matters." His eyes met mine, steady, reflecting the trust and determination that had become our shared language. No words were needed. The bond we had cultivated over years of challenges spoke volumes, carrying courage that even the darkest corners could not erode. Crawling through a narrow vent, I felt the tension coil in my shoulders, muscles ready, senses alert. The air was stale, tinged with the faint scent of Arthur's Colonna's subtle arrogance. A signature he left everywhere, thinking control could be scented as easily as a room could be staged. The vents carried the muffled sounds of the household below. Footsteps, the soft click of objects being moved with calculated care. Laughter that I knew was forced, rehearsed, manipulated. Each sound, each nuance, sharpened my focus, reminding me why I was here and who I needed to protect. My fingers brushed against a familiar weight tucked behind the heating unit Arthur's laptop. It was sleek, black, polished, an instrument of countless deceptions. Yet to me it represented opportunity, leverage, and truth. I drew a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the tremor in my hands as anticipation mixed with fear. This laptop could expose everything. His coercion of Eleanor, the falsified documents, the fabricated stories of her declining mental health, the patterns of manipulation that had kept so many silent and compliant. I could almost hear Eleanor's quiet hope in the rhythm of my heartbeat, urging me to act, to protect, to reclaim what had been stolen. Setting the laptop carefully on the vent's edge, I activated it, the screen illuminating the tight space with an almost reverent glow. Password prompts blinked innocently at me, and for a heartbeat, I hesitated. Then I smiled faintly, recalling the old password he had bragged about to friends and colleagues years ago, Money King. It was absurd in its arrogance, and it was exactly what I needed. Fingers trembling slightly, I typed, the keystrokes echoing softly in the crawl space, and the screen sprang to life. Files and folders lay open before me, windows of truth exposing the careful architecture of deceit he had constructed. I navigated carefully, forwarding evidence to the IRS and local news outlets, every transfer deliberate, ensuring that the chain of proof remained intact, undeniable, unassailable. The names, dates, transactions, emails all converged into a mosaic of corruption and manipulation. Each click of the mouse, each confirmation sent, felt like a small victory, a reclamation of justice through patience, intelligence, and unwavering resolve. Max shifted slightly beside me, nose pressed to the vent grate, alert to every sound, every potential threat, a silent guardian who had become as much a part of my conscience as my own determination. Then, the quiet shattered. A creak from the floor above, subtle but distinct, a sound that froze my blood in an instant. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, breath caught in my throat, ears straining for the next signal of danger. And then the voice, smooth, deliberate, chillingly calm, cut through the storm and silence alike. "We have rats, Chloe. Get the gun." My chest constricted, every instinct screaming urgency, but I forced my body to remain low. Hidden within the vent, absorbing every detail, Arthur's words were precise, deliberate, designed to provoke fear. But they also betrayed something he had underestimated: our vigilance, our bond, and the resilience that would not be intimidated by threats alone. Max growled softly, a low, steady warning vibrating through the metal vent and into my spine. The sound reminded me that courage often manifests in quiet, measured ways, not in dramatic gestures, but in steadfastness and preparation. I allowed the surge of adrenaline to sharpen my focus, transforming fear into clarity, panic into strategy. Eleanor's safety depended on precision, timing, and the patience to act with full awareness of the consequences and risks. I whispered to Max, barely above the hum of the monitors, "We know, Max. We see it all. And we're ready. Whatever comes next, we act together." His ears flicked at the vibration of my voice, his eyes softening with that familiar blend of reassurance and determination. The bond we shared had carried us through storms both literal and metaphorical, and in that connection, I drew the courage to continue, to navigate the crawl spaces of the house and the labyrinth of deceit Arthur had built. Every detail mattered: the angle of the vents, the creak of the floorboards above, the timing of his steps, the placement of the monitors. Each observation, each calculation, strengthened the fragile thread of control we still possessed in a house where manipulation had reigned for far too long. The storm outside roared, rain hammering the roof, but the greater storm was here, in the tension and stakes that pressed against every bone, every fiber of my being. And yet, within that tension, I felt the quiet pulse of hope. The evidence was moving beyond Arthur's grasp. Justice flowing invisibly through wires and screens, a silent reclamation of truth that he would never see coming. And as I paused to catch my breath, listening to the rhythm of Max's quiet shifts beside me, the weight of what we were about to confront pressed against me. The floor creaked again, closer this time, a subtle, deliberate sound, and my heart stuttered in anticipation of the confrontation I knew was imminent. Arthur's next move would determine much, but I felt a deep, unwavering certainty settle within me. We were ready. Max and I, together, were prepared to face the storm, to protect Eleanor, and to transform fear into a quiet, powerful justice that could not be denied. The library was cloaked in shadow, the dim light from the storm-washed windows casting long, jagged patterns across shelves lined with leather-bound volumes. Each one a silent witness to the life that had once been orderly and now teetered on the brink of chaos. Max stood beside me, silent and unwavering, his presence a reminder that courage was not always loud. It could be steady, dependable, and unwavering in its loyalty. I inhaled slowly, the scent of rain and polished wood filling my lungs, letting the calm settle over me like a shield against the storm inside and outside. Arthur stood near the center of the room, hands splayed on the edge of a polished mahogany table, a mask of superiority etched across his features. Dust clung to the corners of his coat, a faint testament to the hurried preparations he had made in anticipation of this confrontation. As if control could be staged, rehearsed, and weaponized. His eyes flicked toward me as I stepped into the open, every movement measured, deliberate, and dignified, despite the adrenaline roaring in my veins. I felt the old tremors of fear, the years of humiliation he had inflicted, ripple across my chest, but I held myself steady, planting my feet firmly, voice calm yet resonant. "You can't hurt me anymore," I said, each word deliberate, the weight of 20 years of manipulation and control behind it. "I have nothing left to fear." The sound of my voice echoed slightly, filling the high-ceilinged room with a sense of finality I had not felt until this moment. The tremor in my hands was gone, replaced by resolve, a quiet assertion of autonomy that Arthur could not touch. Max shifted beside me, his head slightly lowered. eyes reflecting the shared understanding that we were both aware of the stakes, both attuned to the delicate balance between confrontation and chaos. Arthur's lips curled into a half-smile, half-sneer, the arrogance of a man convinced of his superiority radiating from every gesture. Dignified as always, he said, voice smooth but brittle, each syllable a fragile veneer over the tension coiling beneath. Do you really think standing there, dust on your coat, can undo 20 years of arrangement? His hand moved subtly toward the desk, fingers brushing against an object I could not yet discern, and I stiffened, every nerve alert to the potential danger. Then Chloe appeared from the shadows, her posture tense, her eyes flicking between Arthur and me. She held the gun with a tentative steadiness, the faintest tremor betraying the conflict I had planted in her mind through subtle manipulation. Over the previous hours, the quiet doubts I had sown, the insinuations that made her question his morality, his control. Her finger rested on the trigger, not in aggression toward me, but toward him, a silent testament to the power of hesitation and conscience. My chest tightened with cautious hope, realizing that even in complicity, the smallest seed of doubt could grow into decisive action. Arthur's gaze snapped to Chloe, confusion and disbelief mingling with the first glimmer of fear I had ever seen in him. "Chloe," he said, voice sharp but unsure, "what are you doing? This isn't necessary. We're in control here." The words were brittle, rehearsed, and failing to cover the cracks that now spread across his facade. I felt a quiet thrill, not of malice, but of justice, one that had been earned through patience, observation, and the unwavering presence of a loyal companion. Max growled softly, a low vibration that resonated through my legs and the floorboards beneath us. His presence was a reminder that courage could be both silent and commanding, a companion in the moment of greatest uncertainty. I stepped closer, voice calm but unwavering, letting every word carry the weight of experience, the finality of resilience. "You're done, Arthur. Every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to control those you think weaker than you, it ends now." I could feel the tremor in his hands as he adjusted his posture, a subtle admission that his power, long thought absolute, was fragile in the face of conviction. Chloe's eyes flicked to me, and in that brief exchange I understood the depth of the change I had wrought. My subtle manipulations, the quiet insinuations, had planted enough doubt for her to question the man she had followed blindly. Her grip on the gun tightened, but it was no longer an instrument of fear. It had become a vector of truth, a reflection of conscience overcoming coercion. Arthur's lips parted, words caught between command and panic, and I felt the final shift, the balance tipping irrevocably in our favor. Then he lunged, sudden and violent, a desperate attempt to reclaim control, to assert dominance in a world that had quietly turned against him. The sound of glass shattering echoed through the library as a nearby display case splintered under the force. Shards scattering across the polished floor, glinting in the dim light like fragments of a fractured life. My heart leapt, adrenaline spiking, every sense heightened as chaos erupted around us. Max sprang forward, a silent force of protection, positioning himself between Arthur and the imminent danger, teeth bared, body coiled with purpose. The library became a theater of tension and motion, each movement deliberate, each sound charged with consequence. My eyes met Chloe's briefly, her expression a mixture of fear, resolve, and awe. And I realized that this moment, this confrontation, was the culmination of years of patience, observation, and quiet courage. Arthur's power, built on fear and manipulation, was unraveling in the hands of those he had underestimated. I took a measured step forward, letting the calm of resolve temper the storm raging inside me. "It's over," I said again, louder this time, letting the words carry across the room through the chaos. "Nothing you do now can hurt us." The sound of my voice, steady and unwavering, seemed to resonate with Max's presence, amplifying the quiet strength that had guided us through every trial. Arthur stumbled back, the veneer of control shattered, eyes darting between Chloe, Max, and me. The realization dawning that his schemes were exposed, his manipulations undone. The shards of glass crunched underfoot as he moved, each step a mirror of his unraveling composure. I could see the faint flicker of fear, thin and fragile, mingling with disbelief, a sensation I had waited years to witness, the first authentic emotion that was not fabricated or performed. And yet, even in the midst of triumph, I remained aware. Alert to the unpredictability of his next move, the potential for sudden violence. Max's low growl continued, steady and unwavering, a rhythm that echoed the resolve in my chest. Chloe's gun remained trained on him, her posture rigid, hesitant, but now aligned with truth rather than fear. The library, once a sanctuary of calm and knowledge, had transformed into a stage where deceit and courage collided. And in that collision, the first fragile rays of justice began to emerge. The library had become a tempest of motion and sound, a chaotic theater of fear, courage, and determination. Glass shards from the display case glittered under the storm-lashed light, scattered like fragments of the life Arthur had tried to manipulate and control. Every heartbeat in my chest echoed the tension in the room, a rhythmic warning that the next moments could decide everything. Max crouched beside me, muscles taut, eyes locked on Arthur. The low growl vibrating from his chest a clear signal. Danger was imminent, and there was no margin for hesitation. Arthur lunged again, reckless now, driven by desperation rather than control. His face was a mask of fury and disbelief, eyes wild as he realized the balance of power had shifted. I could see it, the first genuine flicker of fear, unmasked and raw. Every inch of me screamed to react, to intervene physically, but I knew Max would be faster, more precise. My chest constricted as he leaped, a living missile of loyalty and instinct. Max's body collided with Arthur's, teeth sinking into the arm that had wrought so much manipulation, a growl resonating through the room like thunder. The sheer force of the tackle sent Arthur sprawling across the floor, the chaos momentarily frozen as dust and rain-laden light mingled over the scene. Arthur's scream of pain cut through the storm's rhythm, a stark reminder of the consequences of cruelty and control. Max held him firmly, unwavering, refusing to relent despite the thrashing and resistance. The sound of sirens approached faintly at first, carried by the howling wind, then grew steadily louder, a promise of justice and order closing in. The neighbors, who had long sensed the undercurrents of fear and tension emanating from the estate, had acted, alerting the authorities, mobilizing the response that we could not summon alone. The first officers arrived, stepping cautiously over shards of glass, their presence both protective and commanding. I exhaled slowly, shoulders sagging with the weight of relief, but I remained vigilant. Arthur's eyes darted to them, realization dawning fully now that the web of control he had spun for decades was collapsing around him. A news crew arrived shortly after, cameras rolling, capturing the arrest and the first moments of accountability. I could feel the weight of vindication settling in my chest. A fragile yet powerful acknowledgement that patience, strategy, and unwavering loyalty could overcome even the most insidious manipulations. I moved swiftly to Eleanor, who had been confined but unharmed in a small study off the library. Her face was pale, eyes wide with relief and disbelief, tears streaking her cheeks as she wrapped her arms around me in a tremulous embrace. "Beatrice," she whispered, voice catching with emotion. I held her tightly, feeling the frailty of her body, the lingering tremors of fear, and the profound relief that surged between us like a tide reclaiming the shore. "It's over, Elenia," I murmured, pressing my forehead against hers. "You're safe now. You're free." Max nuzzled between us, his body warm and solid, a comforting bridge between our vulnerability and the growing sense of security. Eleanor's tears fell onto my shoulder as she clung to me, and I felt a mixture of sorrow, joy, and catharsis swell within me. The years of isolation, of manipulation, of unseen cruelty were dissolving in the presence of loyalty, courage, and justice. I whispered softly to Max, "We did it. We really did it," letting the words resonate through the room, acknowledging the bond that had made this moment possible. Chloe, still trembling with the weight of her actions and decisions, stood nearby, the gun lowered now, her eyes a mirror of conflict and dawning comprehension. I offered her a brief, understanding nod, acknowledging the difficulty of moral choice and the courage it takes to step away from complicity. Her presence, like mine, was a testament to the subtle power of conscience, the ability to reclaim agency even in the shadow of manipulation. Arthur's presence on the floor was pitiful now, a stark contrast to the man who had orchestrated fear and control for so long. The officers moved him carefully into custody, his protests and demands for authority muted by the reality that control had shifted irrevocably. I could feel the weight of the years of manipulation lift, replaced by a profound sense of justice and the quiet dignity of those who endure and survive. Eleanor clutched my hands, her voice trembling as she asked the question that had lingered in her heart, the one I had feared yet longed to hear. "Why did you come back after everything I said?" Her words were soft, vulnerable, tinged with both accusation and hope. And I felt the depth of our bond crystallize in that moment. I pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, voice steady yet tender. "Because family isn't just about blood, Eleanor. It's about loyalty, love, and never abandoning the people who matter most. I promised I'd be here, and I always keep my promises." She exhaled shakily, the tremor in her shoulders slowly subsiding as the storm of fear and tension that had defined the past days began to dissipate. Max nudged my side, eyes reflecting the shared relief and the quiet triumph that comes not from violence, but from steadfastness and moral clarity. The library, still littered with glass and echoes of chaos, now held a new energy, one of reconciliation, emotional release, and the fragile beginnings of healing. The officers led Arthur away, Chloe lowering her weapon completely, and Eleanor's gaze met mine with gratitude and awe. The air, heavy with tension moments before, now carried the subtle, soothing promise of recovery. We moved to the center of the room, holding on to each other, letting the shock, relief, and catharsis wash over us. The storm outside had not yet abated, but inside, a quiet sense of victory, love, and resilience anchored us, reminding us that the greatest heroics are often quiet, personal, and rooted in unwavering loyalty. I watched Max settle between us, tail wagging faintly, ears alert as if to say, "We endured, and we survived together." Eleanor's tears dried slowly, replaced by a tentative smile, fragile but genuine. I knew this was the beginning, not only of freedom and justice, but of rebuilding, reconciliation, and reclaiming a life once overshadowed by fear. And yet the question she had asked lingered, delicate and probing, reminding me that emotional healing requires more than victory. It requires trust, understanding, and the gentle work of the heart. The sun poured gently over the garden, golden light spilling across the flowers and the well-worn path leading to the small wooden bench where I sat. Max was already there, his scruffy coat gleaming in the sunlight. Nose buried in the grass one moment, tail wagging exuberantly the next as he chased a stray butterfly across the lawn. I watched him, heart swelling with a quiet joy, the rhythm of his movements a simple, unspoken celebration of life, trust, and safety. For the first time in what felt like decades, I could breathe fully, without tension clutching at my chest, without the lingering fear that had been my constant companion, whenever Arthur's shadow loomed over our lives. Eleanor approached slowly, barefoot on the soft grass, the faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips more assured than it had been in years. She carried a small folder, and the way she held it spoke of pride and careful consideration. "Beatrice," she said softly, voice tempered with both gratitude and something like humility, I want to contribute to your shelter. I want to help the dogs you've saved, the ones who trust and love because of you." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, the kind that carried both apology and admiration. A delicate acknowledgement of the time we had lost and the love that had endured despite everything. I rose from the bench, letting the sunlight warm my face as I crossed the garden to meet her. Max trotted ahead, circling us once before settling at my feet, ears twitching as if he understood the significance of this moment. I took Eleanor's hands in mine, feeling the subtle tremor that lingered even in the warmth of the sun. "Eleanor," I said, voice gentle, steady, "you don't have to prove anything. You're here now. That's what matters. The dogs will benefit from your heart, and I paused, letting the weight of the years hang between us. "I'm grateful for your trust." Her hands tightened around mine, and I felt the vulnerability, the genuine regret for moments lost, and the quiet resilience that had always defined her. "I was scared," she whispered, "and I didn't know if I could forgive myself for you, for leaving me to face everything alone." Her voice faltered, and I gently brushed my thumb across the back of her hand, a simple gesture of reassurance. "You weren't alone, Eleanor. Max and we never were. And now, we are here. Together. That's all that matters." We moved through the garden slowly, talking quietly about small things at first. The roses, the vegetable patch, the way the sunlight hit the corners of the greenhouse. Each word, each pause was a step toward reclaiming the bond that had been strained and frayed by fear and manipulation. Max started ahead, then back again, reminding us that life was present and alive in the simplest moments, that joy could be found even in the shadow of long struggle. I reflected on everything that had transpired, the fear, the deception, the calculated cruelty Arthur had used to try to bend our lives to his will. And yet, amidst all that darkness, there had been light. Loyalty, trust, courage, and love had endured, subtle and persistent, guiding me through every decision and risk. Justice, I realized, was not merely punishment for wrongdoing, it was reclaiming peace, the quiet dignity of safety, and the freedom to move forward without the constant weight of fear. That realization settled over me like the warmth of the sun, a gentle, unstoppable affirmation of resilience and hope. Eleanor stopped beside a small bench near the fountain, looking out at Max as he rolled gleefully in the grass. "He's remarkable," she said softly, a smile breaking fully across her face. "Not just him, you too, Beatrice. I can't imagine anyone else who would have done what you did, faced what you faced, and still offered me your hand." Her words struck me in a way that was both humbling and empowering, reminding me of the strength that comes from enduring, from choosing action over fear, from remaining steadfast even when the world seems against you. I placed a hand over hers, squeezing gently. "We did it together," I said. "You, me, Max. We all had a part to play. And now we can rebuild, not just the shelter, but our lives, our trust, and the way we see the world." The sincerity in my words was mirrored in her gaze, and I saw a reflection of hope, possibility, and the quiet triumph that comes from surviving adversity with compassion intact. The hours passed gently, filled with laughter that had once been suppressed, with soft conversation about the future, about projects for the shelter, about Max's endless energy and the joy he brought to every corner of our lives. There was no rush, no sense of looming danger, only the serene rhythm of healing, of lives intertwined and restored. Later, as I prepared to leave, I glanced one last time at the garden. the sunlight reflecting on the dew-soaked petals, the gentle sway of the branches in the breeze, and Max padding alongside me. I climbed into my rusted station wagon, the engine sputtering to life, and I felt an unexpected surge of power, a recognition that at 60, I had reclaimed more than safety or victory. I had reclaimed myself. The road ahead was uncertain, yes, but for the first time in decades, I felt capable, grounded, and free. Every mile I drove, every turn, was infused with the knowledge that courage, loyalty, and love had not only saved lives, they had reshaped them, strengthened them, and promised new beginnings. Max lay against the seat, head resting near my arm, eyes half closed but alert, and I smiled softly. Together, we had endured, survived, and triumphed. And though the road stretched ahead, uncertain and winding, it no longer carried fear, it carried possibility. And in that truth, I felt more powerful than ever. If you were inspired by Beatrice, Eleanor, and Max's journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more stories of courage, resilience, and the quiet heroics that can change lives.